Thank you, Lloyd. I appreciate that introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here today. I thought I would start this discussion with the very beginning of this concept of an industrial value-added plan for the state of Wyoming. It first started out of the energy strategy, and if you go back to that document, there are a number of themes that are presented in it. The first is this economic competitiveness, expansion and diversification theme. And it's an oversimplification, I understand, but for a large part, Wyoming is a dig and ship or a drill and pipe sort of state, and we want to look beyond that in our economic diversification and look at changing the state of Wyoming from a net exporter to a value-added product exporter. And the governor often talks about the vast amount of mineral export that we have in BTUs and in other metrics, and I certainly think he's interested in perhaps changing that to some degree in the value-added realm. When we talk about value add, there's certainly value add, and then there is value add in the sense of utilization of waste streams that we have coming off of a lot of the processes in this state, and we'd like to take advantage of those as well. So beyond the energy strategy, in 2012, Governor Mead, actually, I think it may have been 2013. Governor Mead, along with his staff and many others, traveled to Alberta and visited the Industrial Heartland. For those that don't know about the Industrial Heartland, it's a complex that's situated south of the world's third largest supply of oil reserves in the Alberta oil sands. It's a region of chemical, petrochemical, and other oil and gas development. It's been in existence since the 1950s, but perhaps more recently in the 1990s, there was a cooperative process established amongst a regional group of governments from both the local, provincial, and federal level that really catalyzed what exists today. And in 1998, they formed the Alberta Industrial Heartland Association to coalesce those government bodies together. And to date, they've attracted over $30 billion worth of investment. The area, the Industrial Heartland area, encompasses about 225 square miles of industrial land, and certainly there are other lands, as you can see, in this picture incorporated into it. This is the most recent facility that was opened a couple of years ago. In this region, they employ just over 7,000 people. So here's a picture of the region itself, and that purple hatched area represents the defined boundary of the Alberta Industrial Heartland. Again, the geographic area is about 225 square miles. So if you put that in Wyoming, and I apologize that the slide doesn't demonstrate it very well, but there are the borders of the state. There are a couple of other states on here, so this isn't all just Wyoming. But that's about what we're talking about in terms of land mass. And I do have on here that this is for illustration only, so for those that are looking at this project to come to your area, we haven't identified a final site, so it isn't headed to the Bighorn Basin quite yet, maybe. So that just gives a little bit of a graphic representation. It is important to note a couple of things in terms of the advantages that Alberta have. Of course, their land mass, the ownership patterns are a heck of a lot different. The provinces have a lot more authority over air and water regulation, so this in some part will be more difficult for us to emulate. I do like to just talk about this in terms of other areas where we see this happen, and there are lots of examples across the country and the world, but we could look beyond energy into some other areas where they've been able to coalesce around some advantages that they have. And one of those sites that's very close to Wyoming is down in Aurora, Colorado, in the Fitzsimmons redevelopment. In the 1990s, as base realignment was happening in the United States, there were a number of base closures proposed in this area, and the city of Aurora was left with what to do next. And they, along with the state of Colorado, the city and county of Denver, and other municipalities, got together and ultimately envisioned what they believed could be the largest health education, patient care, and biomedical research facility project in the world. And they're well on their way to that. The complex where what I've got shown up here is just over 578 acres. To date, it includes the Anschutz Medical Center, which has within it the CU Hospital and their health sciences programs, Children's Hospital, and for those that are watching the papers in this world, the VA Medical Center that's under construction as we talk. But they also have the Fitzsimmons Life Sciences District that surrounds these major complexes that you see here. They, to date, have been able to attract over $5.2 billion worth of investment since the 1990s, over 16,000 employees on campus, 43,000 are projected at full build-out, and on a daily basis, they receive over 60,000 visitors. So this is a tremendous asset for that region. And this is the sort of thing that we believe we can build in Wyoming and that can lead our energy industrial economy. So from the governor's trip to Alberta, the legislature, a number of them during the 2014 budget session, traveled up to Alberta. It was a darn cold day for them. I believe it was well into the 25 below region, but they went up and visited that area and certainly saw the vision that the governor was talking about and decided to invest in this. And they established what was called what is Section 334 of that budget coming out of that session. It established a number of things. These are kind of the overarching elements of that. One, that the state of Wyoming has the opportunity to encourage expansion and diversification of our energy and industrial economy. Number two, that we have projects and can envision projects that could utilize our natural resources, infrastructure, and human capital. And three, that there was a coordinated effort that could be had amongst the legislative branch and the executive branch of state government to ensure that we had the appropriate policies and processes and procedures to secure additional investment in the state of Wyoming. As part of that Section 334, there was the establishment of a select committee. I've got the current membership of that select committee listed here. We're set to engage with this new group of folks in perhaps next week, maybe a couple of weeks, so that we can bring them up to speed on where we're at and talk some of the more fine details. But they do have a role, of course, in looking at what we're proposing and supporting the efforts to bring resources to the table. And they can do that, of course, through sponsorship of legislation and other actions. Under Section 334, the governor also has a number of responsibilities relative to appointment of task forces as necessary and to consult with that select committee, and we're certainly, we have done that in the past and we will continue to do that. Section 334 also came with quite a bit of resource for us, just over $17 million. You do have to note that $15 million of that is dedicated to the Integrated Test Center. I know you all have heard a great deal about that, and I'm not going to go into detail about that, but that is embedded within this, so that leaves just over $2.275 million available to us for a number of other actions that were to be considered or that we are invested in, whether it's coal ports or international markets. There is also, and I don't have it on here, but a number of carryover items that came with that that support us. This last session, the governor in his supplemental budget request asked for the legislature to establish an industrial park reserve account so that as we get through this process and start to identify projects that we want to move forward on, that we would have the funding support to do that and to continue to attract outside investment to the state. The legislature did follow through on that and put into the budget a line item for contingent improvements, contingent appropriations from investment earnings derived in fiscal year 2016. And the total of that investment as a starting point to establish this account was $5 million. And it also put forth a requirement on our part to come back to the legislature when we desired to move forward in using that funding. We're very hopeful as we engage with that select committee that will be something that is easy for us to pursue. So taking not only the legislative vision but the governor's vision, we have defined an approach that we're currently in the process of enacting or acting upon in order to identify the opportunities for our investment, and so we can attract that investment from the corporate world as well as from other direct investment, whether that be domestic or international. And here's just a quick diagram of that. I'm not going to go into each one of these pieces. I'll just show it to you quickly. But I'll go into each of them broken down a little bit more in this next slide and the slides following. We started out by asking a number of corporate leaders to come to Cheyenne to meet with us over the course of October and December over dinner at the governor's residence to understand whether this was something that was worth our investment in, first of all, and two, could they help us to identify opportunities that existed today for us to move forward on. And we heard a number of different things that we needed to consider, and many of those were focused on ensuring that we had the proper things in place to keep not only the investment we have today, but attract future investment. And over 30 different companies joined us for those dinners, and we found them to be of great success, and we will continue to engage with those corporate leaders, many of them from Wyoming, but we went international in our approach to that. So where are we at today? We're in our information gathering phase. We're trying to prioritize growth areas and identify roughly 10 areas where we could focus our future review here. Got up here who's involved in that, how long it's to take, and the key activities. I'm not going to go into all this because I really want to get to this slide here and really kind of use this Venn diagram to explain a bit about what we're looking at. In the past, there has been a tendency, and this happens in our office, it happens in our economic agencies, to have somebody walk in the door and that becomes the next high priority. And there are those high priorities we need to invest in, and we have been able to do that. But we want to ensure that we find those other areas that we haven't considered where our assets have real value, and let that drive us as well. So we began to discuss this internally with the Wyoming Business Council and other brains that exist within our reach to find a way where we could identify those industrial clusters in particular where there was overlap that we could really take some time and consider. And so we put this together as a diagram for illustrating what we were thinking. We know we have a number of assets in this state that are of great value. I put up 4 of them here. I could put up technology, we could put up helium, we could put up uranium. But what we felt we might be able to do is if we went into each of these clusters, let's take Trona, and went in and looked at that cluster down to, throughout its value chain down to the molecular level, and then match that up against some of these other areas, we would begin to find overlap areas that would define for us investments that the state might consider in attracting talent and companies to the state. So this is, again, a diagram, and we have shown here that perhaps we end up with an investment right there in the middle in the black where it overlaps amongst all 4 of those. That might be our first area of real deep analysis on this, and we would have secondary and tertiary opportunities to evaluate. The other thing that we liked about this is that there has been a lot of pick me in the process, and we certainly understand that, but the value of this is that if we can do this, and we believe we can, it will then show us where we should establish these things. So perhaps if we're looking at Trona, we're going to have to go and look at the southwest part of the state. We're not going to just pick up those Trona mines and move them over to the northeast part of the state, and they have a few of these other assets, so that might work. If we're looking at coal, and some of the opportunities, we might find them in one of those, it might be the primary area, it might be in one of the secondary areas. So that would help us then identify regional opportunities that we could invest in. And so we've reached out to a number of folks within state government and the University of Wyoming and a couple of other folks to help us as part of a working group really refine this. And then we went out and reached to as many of the large, mid-level, and perhaps small scale investment analysis groups to really test this and try and break it. And we've met with the McKenzies of the world, the Bains, the Boston Consulting Group, all the way down to say the 80 group who has worked with the Business Council in the state. And so far they haven't broke this. It's just a matter of how do we do it without expending a lot of resources and identifying granularity in each one of these on the front end and going down a bunch of rabbit trails. So we're continuing to work with them. We do expect to have a final approach identified with them with one of these consulting groups very soon to advance on this project. Just to kind of take this out a little bit further, here's the other elements of that. Again, we've got that Venn diagram, then we can go in and look at those primary, secondary, and tertiary. But equally, we're asking the local governments to go out and look at their assets today. It's not only going to help them for this and attracting the investment that might come from this, but it'll also help them in their day-to-day work if they understand what their transportation systems look like, what water they have, what are their utilities, what are your tax structures, what educational opportunities or housing issues do you face. Do you have existing warehousing space to advance on these things? And we've gotten a lot of support and interest from local governments in that regard. And then as we move through this process, we'll move into a phase of analysis and initial prioritization. As part of our first phase, want to get down to 10. We intend to get in this phase down to 3 or 4 key opportunity areas that we can pursue immediately. And then we will go into our action planning, stakeholder engagement, and implementation. And this is really where we need to define those actions that the government needs to take and then finalize our implementation. And a key piece of all of this will be industry validation of what we're doing. And we will, as necessary, engage working groups or task forces from those industries to get us to the right place. The other part of this, and maybe this kind of transitions into what Dawn is going to talk about, if we identify an opportunity that's immediately actionable, we're not going to wait. We are going to move on that. Those golden nuggets exist out there, and we will work with the legislature to support those industries. So with that, I'll stop, and I'll be happy to take any questions about the approach that we're working on, and look forward to working with all of you as we begin to refine this and get to those industry clusters that we can attract to our state, or perhaps enhance those that exist here today.
Question from the board. Question from the audience. Coming at you.
Daniel Cardenas, American Infrastructure Association. So my question would be, what, if anything, has your team reached out with the tribes? I know you mentioned reaching out to the counties and the localities to help identify either land or resources and that sort of thing. And you know, I missed the earlier part of your presentation, so I apologize. So you may have mentioned it, but is there has the governor or your staff reached out to the tribes and asked them to be a part of this effort? And then the second question would be, well, because and it's related. It's just that I had mentioned to the Pipeline Authority last year. Or before, maybe a couple years ago, when they were doing their corridor study, their pipeline corridor study, if you look at the map, it doesn't include the reservation. It goes around the reservation. And so when the tribes see that, it's upsetting to them just because they weren't included in any of these, or from their perspective. So, just as an example, I think that would be my suggestion. If you haven't reached out to the tribes, then I think that would be a good idea to at least make the effort. Because I think that would be sort of a way to reach out. Because I know in the past the governor and the legislature and the tribes haven't had a good track record recently because of the EPA stuff and various other things. But anyways, I was just apologize for going along.
I appreciate the question. I personally have not reached out to the tribes. I'll be happy to get your contact information, and if you have somebody you'd recommend that we speak to, I'd be happy to do that at any point in time. I'd be happy to come up to the reservation and talk to the tribes. I have talked to the Business Council, who is helping us on that evaluation of local assets, and I would expect the regional director there to speak with the tribes and trying to gather that information. So I'll take that back. As it relates to the corridor initiative that we're pursuing right now, again, I personally have not. Matt Fry, who's leading that in our office, I'll be happy to go back and talk with him. It would be a process of identifying, are there sinks or opportunities for us to pursue. That's really what that's been driven by, more so than tribal politics or our perception of tribal politics. But if you have a contact that I should be in touch with, I'd be happy to do that.
Question here.
Cindy Wallace with Carbon County Economic Development. Have you reached out, I know you said you're working with the Business Council, but have you reached out to our local economic development agencies to be working on the set of guidelines and do all the evaluations and find out all the guidelines and priorities and look at all of our assets in our region? I've been waiting to hear something through the state somehow, but we've not received anything. I know Carbon County, Sweetwater County, Lincoln, and Uinta went together on a resolution through the county commissioners. But we, as local economic development organizations, myself, I've not heard anything yet or been asked for help on evaluating our local resources. Are you reaching out to the local economic development people?
Yes, the answer is absolutely yes. I met with the county commissioners during the legislative session to bring them up to speed on what we were looking at. I went out to Sweetwater County myself. I know you guys are looking at a much broader region. I haven't been to Carbon County specifically. I've equally reached out to the Wyoming Association of Municipalities on this effort. And then we've asked, and I don't know that they're actually knocking on doors at this very second, but the Business Council through each one of the regional representatives are going to be the point person responsible for going out and working with each of the local communities to gather that information. They've got the typical site selector process and database that they're trying to use in order to gather the appropriate information so that if we have somebody that's interested in pursuing an opportunity, whether it's today or as part of this process, that it's a similar data set and we're not trying to, or they're not looking at different information depending on where they're at.
But is that data set, has that been sent out?
Again, as I mentioned, I don't...
I've been waiting on it and I haven't received anything.
Yeah, I would encourage you to reach out to your Business Council regional rep. They're going to be the ones doing that individual touch.
Yeah, well, she hasn't received anything either. I've been asking.
Who's your regional rep?
Pat Robbins.
Pat Robinson and I have talked at great length about this, so I'm surprised. I will follow up with her, though.
And the other thing I'm asking too, real quick, are you looking at, I know you have oil, gas, trona, coal, you mentioned uranium. Are you looking at wind also for a resource?
As I mentioned on the slide, that was just an illustration. Within that, we will consider all of the various resources. In our initial scrub, I don't know how that will screen out through the process, but we will look at a lot of different resources.
Okay, thanks.
So Jeremiah, thank you so much. And let's give Jeremiah a hand, please.